Hello everyone and welcome to Game Stories. I'm Jessica Brest. Have you ever wondered where different game genres came from? Like, what was the first platformer? And how has the first-person shooter changed over time? Well, today we're going to be delving into the deep, dark history of horror games.
If you're watching right now, you've probably heard of a few popular horror titles before, like Outlast or the recently released remake of Resident Evil 2. But how did these games become so popular to begin with, and so creatively scary? In order to find these unknown ancestors, we're gonna have to go all the way back to the 1970s. Thanks to a burst in the popularity of horror movies between the 1970s and 80s, the first horror game made its debut. Haunted House, released in 1972, was created not for the PlayStation 1 or even the Atari, but for the Magnavox Odyssey. Haunted House was a two-player game that involved placing a plastic sheet over a TV screen with two movable lights. The person that controlled the ghost hid their blinking light somewhere in the game while the detective had to explore the map and find the ghost. Not scary in the least, but it introduced the classic mechanic of cat and mouse that would be the foundation for future games. In 1989, a game called Sweet Home was created for the NES. Based on a film, this horror RPG involves a team of filmmakers who get trapped inside a mansion and are looking for a way out. The ominous 8-bit soundtrack and surprisingly freaky graphics makes this an eerie game to play even by today's standards. 7 years later, the first Resident Evil was released, which took a lot of inspiration from these previous horror games in its survival-style gameplay. It was a third-person shooter where the primary enemies were zombies, a theme that certainly hasn't left game makers today. In 1999, we received the highly successful Silent Hill, often referred to as one of the first classic horror games. This game involved a father searching for his missing daughter while having to face monsters conjured up by a demon, I think? So, speaking of demons, in 2001, a truly terrifying game style was created based on Japanese mythology. In this game, the player's only weapon is a camera, which they use to capture photos around a haunted mansion, thus encountering every possible terrifying spirit from your nightmares in a flash. Arguably, one of the most influential horror games came out in 2010, Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Funnily enough, this was not a game for a console, but instead for the computer. Amnesia challenged previous ideas of survival horror by shifting the focus away from fighting monsters and towards the central character's own state of being. The result dramatically altered the horror genre as a whole. Now onto a classic. Slender Man made its debut in 2012 and took the internet by storm. I don't think I know of a single YouTuber who didn't play the game at least once that year. It was another very simple survival horror that was based entirely on the lore of a creepypasta. Now, remember Outlast? Well, that rough-and-tumble survive inside of a random asylum game came out the very next year, in 2013, and follows Amnesia's example of a combat-free experience. A truly innovative game that brought the idea of survival horror to another level came out in 2014, Five Nights at Freddy's. This game and all of its sequels showed that a successful and utterly stressful horror game could be made even when the player had to stay in one place the entire game.
And that is the story of horror games. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more, and comment down below what the oldest horror game you've ever played is. I'll see you guys next week.